and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Okay, so my name is Felicia Parks, and I am the SOC Career Advisor located in the Main Career Center. Before coming to American University, I worked in recruiting, hiring people ranging from internships to senior level positions. So today I'm sharing the secrets used by various companies when looking to hire candidates. Although this session is live, it is being recorded and the video will be available on the American University Career Center YouTube page. If you need closed captioning, I encourage you to click the More button and select Live Transcript at the bottom of your screen. All right, let's start with the purpose of the interview. The common misconception is that the interview is a one-sided process where the employer determines if a candidate should be hired. Well, yes, the employer is evaluating your ability to add value to the overall achievement of their organizational goals and mission. However, they're also trying to sell you on the culture of the organization, opportunities for promotion and benefits. So you as a candidate or future employee has to determine if the employer's organization is a place where you want to spend most of your day, how it impacts your personal life factors such as salary, vacation time, and benefits, because the type of work you would do attributes a lot to your independence, variety on the job, the ability to be creative, and more. And with the pandemic being a key factor, it could also mean a strong interest in a hybrid working model where working in the office part of the time, but working remotely would be important to you. And some roles could even offer 100% remote work. While the employer tries to identify their interest in you, there are a few things you can do. Research the organization, take notes, be ready to ask well thought out questions, find ways to create rapport and engage with the interviewer, smile and look confident, but most importantly, be sure to market your unique skills when answering questions. But let's chat about the many types of interviews and interview formats, including artificial intelligence, where the employer uses pre-recorded questions that candidates must answer within a certain period of time, and the algorithm determines if they proceed with you in the interview process. My colleague Rob San George has a great presentation on AI and the recruiting process, so be sure to check out the American University's Career Center YouTube page for the link. In the meantime, let's go over a few of these interviews and formats. So in-person interviews are the same as virtual and phone interviews, where recruiters and hiring managers, they want to know if you can do the job that's required. So they'll ask specific questions. It's key to have your resume and your application ready and to take time to prepare for your interview in advance. In most cases, everything will go smoothly, but it will cause you a lot less stress if you practice in advance. We actually recommend that you do a trial run or a mock interview at least a day or two before the interview, so that when you're answering questions, you'll be able to define your brand, talk about your professional interests, skills, and experiences in about 3 to 4 sentences. You feel comfortable maintaining eye contact, asking questions, and practicing active listening. And then you can search for opportunities to share your knowledge about the industry or articles and ways you can help the organization. Last but not least, ask for business cards or their email address so you can send personalized thank you messages at the end of the interview. So what about that phone interview? You can expect various types before receiving an offer, and sometimes the most widely used one for the initial interview is the phone interview. It's usually 30 minutes or less, and it's possibly impromptu. So basically, once you submit for an application, the employer may call you unexpectedly and ask if you have any questions that you can answer, or a few minutes to discuss a specific position and your skills. Now, the interviewer can't read your body language or notice your eye contact during a phone interview, so they're going to be totally relying on the sound of your voice. So a nice trick is to place the mirror in front of your phone, and if you see yourself smiling during your responses, the smile actually indicates enthusiasm to the listener. Your virtual interview is just as important as an in-person, phone, or other types of interviews. So here are key things to remember. Make sure your lighting is in front of you to ensure your face is clearly visible and there are no shadows or backlighting. Choose either sunlight or indoor lighting, but not both, unless you want those awkward colors on your face. Make sure your face and upper torso appear in the middle of those 9 squares I have showcased here. And employers are going to compare your body language to your level of interest. So move closer to the camera. Keep that camera just above eye level, just to maintain eye contact. Be mindful of your background, such as a cluttered room will make you seem disorganized, or distracting elements on the wall will pull the attention away from you. So keep the background simple and professional. Consider wearing headphones to help eliminate background noises, and make sure that employer can hear you a bit more clearer. So panel interviews are when employers may have several individuals in the room participating in an interview process. This is used mainly to determine if you're a good fit within a team environment. And the panelists could be members of your potential team, it could be leaders of the organization, and or alumni from your school that formerly worked in your role. The behavioral interview is quite tricky. It could be one-on-one with multiple people interviewing you in the same location or online. And each person you meet with will have input on the hiring decision. So it's very important to pay close attention to each individual, make eye contact and greet each one in the behavioral as well as the panel, and then thank them after the interview. Some sample behavior categories include like communication skills, conflict resolution, time management, organization, and so many more. I'm going to also highlight the purpose of a behavior interview for the employer, which is it's more information that they can get about you. You get a chance to learn about the essential function of the position. The employer can make decisions about proceeding with an actual interview or an offer a lot faster. It actually makes the process fair to all candidates by having the same questions, and it reduces legal liability. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the STAR response format a bit later, but now we're going to move over to the case interview. So in order to prepare for a case interview, you should try to familiarize yourself with the types of analysis you might employ. Practice generating sound, defensible hypotheses, and then practice with classmates, friends, family members, or alumni. Check out Boston Consulting's group website or McKinsey and Company for some sample case questions. When you get a case question, here are some quick tips. Actively listen to the case, establish your understanding by kind of repeating some of the things that they've said. Take notes and set up the framework, evaluate the case using that framework, and then summarize and make recommendations. Not many have already experienced this, but there is a such thing called a super Saturday or a site visit. And it usually takes place at the employer's facility, and it can last anywhere from an hour to a full day. The site visit could include a meal with key individuals, testing on site, and possibly a tour. It also includes candidates from multiple campuses, and the candidates might be in an interview setting one-on-one, or could be a group or panel interview. And most of the time, the hiring decisions are sometimes made before the end of the day. So what happens in an actual structured interview? This is a sample of general open-ended questions that you could practice and make sure your answers are sound so you have the best representation of yourself. Some other tips during the interview process is have your resume and a list of questions that you'd like to ask the employer close to you. Be sure you review your resume beforehand so you're more familiar with some of the skills and accomplishments you've had, and you're able to answer questions about your previous education experience. And if you submitted a writing sample, reread that before the interview, just in case the employer starts to ask you questions about the piece that you wrote. So I promised you we would go over the STAR format, and you can look at this graphic here and see that STAR stands for situation, task, action, sometimes called action steps, and results. So with the situation, you want to clearly state whatever the situation or problem you encountered. With task, you're going to describe the context in which the behavior or action took place. And with action, the steps that you took to handle the situation or resolve the problem. And then lastly, the results, you can indicate the reasons for your decision and quantify or note improvement if it didn't go well. Behavior interviews actually give you an opportunity to incorporate what we call transferable skills within your story. So things like teamwork, delegate, ability to motivate others, dealing with obstacles, multitasking. And because there's no right way to answer our behavioral interviewing question, you can also incorporate those self-management skills, such as your ability to finish tasks on time, be reliable, dependable, persistent, enthusiastic. So tactful bragging is the most important thing as far as you can connect with people. So when you're giving your story format, definitely make sure you brag about all your great accomplishments. It's not a choice, it's a necessity. Your introduction could happen in an interview setting or networking event. So this introduction, which is also often called an elevator pitch, again, is a way for you to brag about yourself and then request information from the person you're interacting with so that you can follow up and stay in touch. So sometimes the things that you would say if the first question is, tell me about yourself. And when you tell them about yourself, you want to connect your skills to what the employer needs are. Now, we've been in the pandemic for over a year and a half now, and so we've had a lot of virtual time. So preparing for your virtual interviews is key. Checking your webcam, your headset or microphone as if you're going to actually do the interview a day or two before. You want to try to use the same technology that you practice on so that you know that everything is working. And that way you won't have any last minute installation issues or password problems right before your interview. Again, your camera should be eye level and not below. A poorly placed camera could result in an unflattering double chin or weird shadows. So you also want to check your sound equipment to make sure it works properly. And then regardless of your location, make sure that you send whatever materials they're asking for. It could be a resume, a portfolio, to that recruiter in advance. Make sure you test your Wi-Fi, the meeting software that they send you the link to, and your device prior to your virtual interview. And then if possible, you want to try to join your virtual session at least 5 to 10 minutes ahead of time. Some programs require you to download or update existing software, and that's why you want to try to test the link the night before. Be sure to avoid these common mistakes: sitting on your bed, accidentally putting yourself on mute, selecting video off when logging onto the site, having a defective or non-working camera, wearing inappropriate clothing such as a t-shirt or sweatpants. But also be sure to turn off your cell phone, put your watch on silent, and don't eat, drink, or lay down during your interview. If you want to know more about Zoom interview, I actually have a video as well on the American University YouTube page, Career Center page, that you can check out. So all these backgrounds are beautiful and they're fun when we're Zooming with our family members and friends. But in an interview setting, it's key that you completely remove these virtual backgrounds so that you can eliminate that glowing alien look that you have around your hairline and your hands. Whether it's professional attire or business casual, you want to be presentable by making sure your outfit is coordinated and wrinkle-free. And that even goes for virtual interviews. Make sure you're dressed properly and groomed appropriately. Now you may be thinking, Felicia, you've talked a lot about this interview process and you told me I should practice, but how do I practice? Well, more questions that the employers may ask can come directly from the qualifications and responsibilities that they've outlined in the job description. So use Handshake or different websites. This might be a little bit small on the screen, but this is an example of a job description I came across. And you can look through the key responsibilities, the minimum qualifications, preferred qualifications, and duties and responsibilities, and say, how would I answer this if it was in a question format? Now, other questions you should probably plan on from the employer include, when we move back into the office, are you willing to work in that space? And because you may not know what their office space looks like, you may want to ask how the office was adapted based on the COVID-19 requirements. How are the desks set up? Was there adjustment to the air system? This might be an awkward question for you, but it's important for you to ask. The other things they may ask is that, do you need accommodations to work in this office space? And those accommodations could be anything from, I need a special computer app to read the screen for me because I have challenges reading small print, or I need to use headphones to hear a little bit more carefully. Now, one great tool or ways to practice is that you could consider reaching out to alumni for individual feedback on your interview skills. Alumni Fire is a free tool where members have volunteered to provide career advice, resume reviews, information interviews, and more. So don't be shy, be proactive. And that's the website there at the bottom, american.alumnifire.com. If you have a LinkedIn account, one less password you have to learn because you can connect it through your LinkedIn account, or you can join as long as you have an american.edu email address. So definitely sign up for that. What about that fear of the interview process? Overcoming what I call stage fright could be as simple as doing stretches or going for a walk before your interview, practicing your answers to your questions that the employer may ask, and then making sure you able to share that information in that format. Some typical questions that I haven't already mentioned is, what have you learned about yourself since you were in quarantine? How have you been spending your time? Have you taken online courses, whether for credit or non-credit, to keep up or improve your skills? Are you learning a new foreign language? Have you developed a new app? Have you initiated a volunteer project? And don't hesitate, most of all, to ask an employer to repeat a question if you did not understand it, or maybe you didn't hear it, because part of that fear, your heartbeat is really loud, your breathing feels really loud, and maybe you didn't hear the question. So be sure to ask them to repeat the question. The whole goal of the interview is that you want to share relevant information about yourself, but you don't want to monopolize the interview for too long a period of a time. You want to give them a chance to explain what they do as an organization and have a nice conversation. Now, there's a great tool to help you prepare for the interview, and that would be with our Big Interview. So when you use Big Interview, this platform allows you to practice responding to interview questions that are from general industry or competency-based questions, basically behavior interviews. And it can range from the standard questions to tough. So if you want to learn how to do that, you can click that link that is accessible through your Handshake account for current AU students. And that way you can learn more about how to answer questions as well through the fast track curriculum. So there are questions that are pre-recorded and it gives you different categories and you can listen to what they say. So become a master by using Big Interview. This screenshot shows you how to access the site. You can again access it through Handshake. Once you're logged in to your account, click the tab that says Career Center, venture over to the Resources tab, and then register for Big Interview by clicking the field and then entering 0825. Speaking of LinkedIn Learning, here's a snapshot of all the different courses that you can take. This is a great way for you to think through, like, what are some other video tips? And you want to access this through, if you don't already have it on your profile for LinkedIn, you want to access this through the portal and then the library database. Then you'll click the letter L, you go down to LinkedIn, it'll have you log in. Once it's there, it'll connect to LinkedIn, and that way you can use the tool for free since American University is covering the cost for that for you. So this is just a snapshot of some of the courses I pulled out that actually focus on interviewing. The great thing about this, some of these classes could be an hour long, but they're all broken down into 3 to 5 minute sessions, and they actually have a virtual transcript there. So you can read the transcript and copy and paste things to help you prepare. Throughout the course, you can go straight to the section that makes sense for you. Last but not least, we have more than 25 advisors and staff that are eager to help you prepare for your upcoming interview. So if you want to do a mock interview, you would indicate that in Handshake. You schedule that one-on-one. It's great to include the link in the job description that you want to be considered for the mock interview, and we'll practice with you. You could use Big Interview and share your link with your advisor. You would still schedule a one-on-one advising session in Handshake, and you would email them and say, here's the link. I would love your feedback. They'll review it during that 30-minute session and email you some feedback about that as well. So that was my presentation on how to prepare for your upcoming interviews. I would love to answer any questions. They can be live if you want to be requested to be unmuted, or you can add them to the chat. I wish you best of luck in all that you're going to be doing, and I'm looking forward to the questions that you have. And there's also, which I didn't mention, I'm sorry, there's also a Q&A section. You can be anonymous in that format, and I can answer the questions live through this way as well. So I have a question for you all while you're thinking of your questions. Has anyone participated in a panel interview? And you can feel free to raise your hand. I won't call on you for an example, but has anyone participated in a panel interview? Oh, perfect. Love hearing that. And then has anybody had a behavior interviewing question? I'll give you what a sample question is. It's like, tell me about a time you worked with a difficult person or difficult circumstance. What was the result and how did you be successful? Has anybody had a behavioral interviewing question so far? Okay. Well, Sophie has a question. What is a good example of what to say when an employer asks at the interview, do you have any questions for us? So, Sophie, one of the great things about the interview process is that it's a way for you to showcase your knowledge of the organization. So I encourage you to do some research. It shouldn't be things you can find directly on their website. I like to go straight to their PR page and see some of the press releases that they've had out, or maybe look at new business and say, hey, I noticed that you now are making widgets and people are shipping widgets from their remote locations. How has that helped productivity, or how has that actually increased the happiness that people have on the job? So there's lots of questions you can ask. I would say, write out at least 2 or 3 questions, because sometimes in their introduction about what they do as a company or something about the position, it may have answered one of your questions, but you definitely want to show you have questions for them. If you say, I don't have any questions, you covered everything, then they feel as though you weren't as engaged, or sometimes they feel like you haven't done the research. So very important to ask questions. One of the handouts that I'll include is to our interviewing handout, and it has questions that you can ask the employer. And then you can actually tailor that based on the job description. And speaking of job description, really important thing, the day that you apply, copy and paste that job description into Word or whatever format works best for you, Google Calendar or Google Docs, because the day you go in for the interview, I promise you that job posting won't be live. And so you want to be able to take a look at that and make sure you have all the different skills, qualifications outlined that you can actually talk about in the interview setting. So perfect. So what if you don't have a place in your house that has a good background for Zoom? Great question. So a lot of people, are in like a studio, or maybe they're in a household with multiple people. I'm in a household with multiple people, and I have to kind of walk around and tell everybody, I have a presentation, I have a meeting, you have to turn off your Wi-Fi. And so in my office here, you can see behind me, as I call it, my wall of accomplishments. And so I have things that are behind me. But a lot of times you can actually rent a space. So I've gone on different websites. Sometimes they're like near a cafe, it's in an office building, sometimes it's near an airport, but you can actually rent these spaces sometimes as cheap as $15 an hour. And you may be thinking, oh, I don't even have $15, but there's a possibility that you can get a job offer. So if you feel like you don't have a good place for Zoom and it's not quiet, it's worth using those office spaces. Now, when the Career Center opens up later this year, we're going to be opening August 16th. There are limited times that we'll have available for office space for you to reserve. You can definitely reserve the Career Center and say, I have an interview. Because we're practicing social distancing and there's limited space on campus, you'll definitely have to schedule that in advance. And you can always use our Career Center interview rooms for your interviews. And don't be afraid to ask a friend or a family member, hey, can I come to your place? And because I have this really important Zoom and I don't have $15 to reserve on one of these office spaces that many people offer. So great questions. I love these questions. Now, one of the things that you will definitely find handy is that when you go into Handshake, you'll see not only the job descriptions, but you'll also see, if you haven't taken advantage of it, you'll see a list of students that have potentially worked for that company. So in addition to Alumni Fire, you can click the names of those students and try to connect with them. When you go click connect, you don't see their contact information like their address or email or telephone number. They won't see yours, but it's a way for you to reach out to them and say, what was the interview process like? Did they take you through a phone interview, a panel interview, a behavior interview, a Super Saturday event, or was it just a really quick interview process and they hired you on the spot? So don't be afraid to reach out to those students. And some of them may not be American University students, and that's okay. They've made their profile public within the Handshake tools. So that means they're willing to chat with you. So please take advantage of that. Any other questions? Don't be shy with any questions that you may have, because somebody else may be thinking the same thing. Because the interview process sometimes can be quite intimidating. And I can tell you, as a former recruiter, here's another secret that I didn't share before, is that oftentimes I was nervous at the beginning of the day. I knew I had to find, 3 great candidates to fill a position. I hoped I had picked the right 7 or 8 people to interview. I hope it went well. I had a hiring manager that said, you better find me these 3 people because I have new business that I'm starting and it's very key. And so I was hoping I picked the right people that I saw on paper or maybe met at a job fair or networking event. So the first part I thought, I've got to make the right hire. And the second part was, there's going to be a candidate that's going to ask me a question that they looked up on their cell phone about some fact about the company that I work for that I'm not aware of. They're trying to trick the recruiter. So quite often I was nervous to try to make sure I was able to build rapport with the candidate and also make sure I found the right people. So fantastic. Well, there aren't any other questions. Again, I mentioned that. Oh, okay, sorry. There's a question that came in the chat. Thank you so much. So at the beginning of the interview, when they ask for, tell me about yourself, what kind of things should you include? That's a great question. So one of the things I mentioned before is that you definitely want to connect it to what's in the job description, right? So I don't necessarily say, hey, I'm the oldest and I'm a native Washingtonian. That a lot of those things may not matter as much as it is about my skills. So let's say when I was applying for the job here as a career advisor with the Career Center, I said, one of the great things you may know is that I'm a recruiter and that I've been in this role where I'm hiring people. And so one of the great things I can do is showcase what is necessary to be successful. I can walk students through the resume critique. I'm able to showcase my transferable skills, things that you may not be able to notice directly on my resume is that I'm very committed to the role. I'm always looking for ways to improve my skills. And I've done it in such a way where I've volunteered at my alma mater, Howard University, in their career center, and I gave them more detail. So whatever things you think stand out on that job description that you feel like you have a great story around, you can tell a little bit about yourself as it connects to that story. So they'd like to ask that question a lot. So it's like, tell me about yourself. Sometimes they may notice something on your resume that's personal. Like, for example, I have a son who's an actor. And so there are things he has at the bottom of his resume and they'll say, oh, I noticed you've been acting. How long have you been doing that? Have you been in any productions? Just to kind of break the ice, put both of you all at ease, or especially if it's a panel interview. So great question. Thank you so much for asking. So if there aren't any additional questions, again, I mentioned that we would have this recording available on our American University YouTube site. And you'll also get an email tomorrow that has some additional handouts. Take a look at those handouts. If you have additional questions, definitely reach out to your career advisor. You're going to meet with your career advisor by scheduling through Handshake, and then you'll know what day and time that you all are meeting. You'll click onto the Zoom link at the time that you're meeting. You can also put in there that this is interview prep, or I have more questions about how to prepare. The best thing to do is prepare for an interview before you're offered one, because as Murphy's Law would have it, if you go to schedule it after you get an interview offer, it'll be too short of a time period for you to be able to try to connect with a career advisor and get tips. So you're doing the right thing by participating in our summer series right now. Sorry to get a little tongue-tied. You're doing a great thing by participating in our series this summer, that you're being prepared ahead of time, and that way you'll be successful in all your interviews. I wish you all continued success. Thank you for joining our session today, and have an amazing afternoon.